is April Jennifer Choi, and today we're going to learn how to make this Leviwand. What makes it so special, this is a steel Leviwand that's also capable of doing fire-eating tricks and is hollow with two different slots, so therefore you can pull from one or the other end. I'll have a link in the description to the video that demonstrates this wand. So I ended up getting a bunch of 3/8 inch outer diameter and 1/4 inch inner diameter stainless steel tubing for this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this down to the length I want, which for me is going to be 30-inch Leviwand. To cut the Leviwand, I'm going to be using a 46 grit, 10,000 RPM aluminum oxide blade, and I'm going to end up changing this right now. So I will be making 30-inch hollow Leviwands, which means I'm going to mark the steel tubing down to 30-inch increments. I will also be cutting the steel plug that goes in the center. The steel plug does two things. One, it separates the two chambers so they can draw from either side, and it also provides a little bit more strength where the center hole ends up being. So the next thing I'm going to do is drill the holes at each end that will actually allow the vapor to pull in through the Leviwand. I'm actually going to do a series of 8 holes. Now, since there's a 2-inch wick that will be on top of here, and I usually put a filter down through here, so that means I'll have to leave a space for about 1/2 inch, so I have 1.5 inches that I need to cover. I don't want to have a hole too close to this end, so that means I'll have about 1.25 inch of spacing between the end and here. So I actually put the marks on my jig, since I make a ton of these, so you can see those are the 4 marks. So I hold the end of the tube up to each of those marks, and that's what allows me to know where to place my holes. So this is the hole distribution that I tend to use. You can see there are 8 holes. I basically do 4 drill passes. So now I'm going to mark the center of the Leviwand, as well as where I'm going to do the 2 draw holes for the hollow Leviwand. And I forgot to mention that these holes out here are going to be 1/8 inch. The draw holes are also going to be an 1/8 inch, maybe even 1/4 depending how I feel. And then the tiny hole that's going to be in the dead center is only going to be a 1/16 of an inch thick, or in diameter. After drilling the end holes, the center hole, and the outlet holes, I'm just going to file down all the burrs. And don't forget to file off the burrs and everything on these tiny little plugs, steel plugs. This next part is going to be a little bit difficult to show, but I'm at least going to explain what's happening. This plug is going to go in the center of the Leviwand, and it needs to be epoxied in place so it doesn't ever move, especially since we're going to be drilling it later. The way I accomplish this task is I have a push rod, and now there's 3 holes here, the inlet holes and the center. What happens is I take this particular piece, I put it in there, and I end up pushing it all the way down until I get to this point. Okay, so that should be right there. So that's that inlet hole. When I get to that point, what I do is I put epoxy into that inlet hole right here, and I'll push it until I see the center mark on this little plug get to the center mark of this hole. It's what's going on inside it, so it's really difficult to show, but hopefully that all makes sense to you. The next thing we're going to do is wick the Leviwand. So what I'm going to do here is make sure that I have enough wick to make a filter, as well as cut wick so that it will wrap around the end of the Leviwand correctly. The next thing that we do after we cut our wick is start attaching the wick to the Leviwand. So what I do first is I go ahead and cut 2 small pieces of wire. Here I am using, I believe, 16 gauge wire. I then take this wire, thread it through the Leviwand in the 2 lower holes, and then make sure that it goes through the wick, and then I just make little staple ends and then I clamp the whole thing together, and therefore it would have to shear 2 different pieces of wire in order to come off, so then it's super secure. This is what it looks like on the end of the Leviwand. Those two wires go through the Leviwand, and then the entire thing basically staples it on there. And of course there is a kitten. After you get your wick on your Leviwand, the next thing is just to sew the wick on there. The only things that I recommend for when you do wicking is make sure none of the threads are exposed. So basically I go in and then try to come back straight out and not do overlapping stitches so that none of the threads are exposed. And then make sure that I seal all the way through the filter, so therefore this can't pull the filter out. And that's about it. And have angry kittens. Once you get the wicks sewn onto your Leviwand, I'm just going to go ahead and wrap them in silicone. In this case, this is going to be a red and a black one to be able to mark the two halves of the Leviwand, as well as keeping it cool so that you're not grabbing hot steel. The silicone will prevent you from burning yourself. I'm simply going to string my Leviwand. Actually, yes, balancing after this, but now you just string it however you want to string it. So for this one, I should have had the black be the bottom, so then I'm just going to go about 3 or 4 inches above on this side. So once you're done with your Leviwand, you can balance if you feel like it. For this one, I like it to take 1001, and it'll be right up at the top at that point. So now I can go ahead and play around with my new